got the new clutch and flywheel and installed, and I had a heck of a time getting the pilot bearing out. I don't have an actual pilot bearing puller. I've never needed one. There's tricks to getting them out. You can pack them full of bread, oddly enough, and keep shoving bread in there and use a bolt or a extension that fits just inside the hole and wrap it with tape if you need to. And you can usually hit it, and the pressure will, the hydraulic pressure, people use grease too, but it's messier, will force that pilot bearing out. But I couldn't for the life of me get this one out, so I ended up chiseling it out, which it wasn't a lot of fun, but I spent less time doing that than the other stuff, so I guess that would have been better off to start with. So what I'm doing now is getting the transmission ready to install, and I've bought a steel retainer on these T5s from the factory that are aluminum, and you can see here this one's getting scored, and there's a bit of a groove worn into that right there, and that can cause problems with your throwout bearing. So there's a easily attainable replacement with it's got a steel sleeve on it. So I'm going to get that installed before I put the transmission in. I just wanted to mention that for anybody else. You got your transmission out, you might as well do that, because I don't think it was a very expensive part, and it'll keep you from having problems later on. Okay, got the engine all buttoned back up, got the transmission installed with new clutch, flywheel, throwout bearing, pivot point, that input bearing retainer on the transmission with the steel collar. So we'll get her stuck back in and go from there. I've decided, since I had the engine out, it would be a good time to replace the weather seal on this front vent that pops up on these. And after I took the vent out and pulled the weather stripping off, the paint, there's several layers and all that under there, so it's like, oh, it'd be a good time to sand that down and kind of do a little primering and painting under that before I put it back together, because long term it'd be nice not to have to do that again, since it's so nice to stand right in front of this and mess with this. So what I'm doing is I've sanded it down with some 80 grit. Nothing, you're not going to see this area at all, so it doesn't have to be real pretty. And then what I've done on this paper, I've seen this trick before, not that it really matters on this project, but if you run the tape down the back like that and then you fold the paper over, it doesn't give you a hard line for the paint. See how the paper's kind of rolled up and back? It doesn't give you a hard line like a tape line would, so it allows you to kind of feather it in. It really doesn't matter with this. I'm not trying to really blend this, because the paint job's all nasty and faded, but I figured it might look a little better in the meantime while I do that. So I'm going to lay a couple coats of primer down, and then a quick coat of some Farmall red. I don't even know what truck color I'm going to paint this truck long term. It was red before. I've thrown some red there over my patch areas, so I'll just continue with that. While I'm waiting for my paint to dry on my weather strip replacement project on the front vent, I'm going to work on my shifter thing here. So this is the factory S10 shifter, and it don't amount to much. So I've seen other guys do this. I bought a cheap Mustang shifter off of eBay, aluminum plate. It's got positive stops for the shifter, and it's a much nicer shifter, and I can put aftermarket or whatever shift levers on it. But what I got to do is make the bolt pattern the same as the S10 pattern, so it should be doable with this. I think I'll probably have to wallow these holes out a little bit and then drill new holes back here. But so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to disassemble this shifter and try to set this one over this to mark the holes. I think I can do that. I think that hole's big enough for that, flip it upside down and just made it right at face it. Then I'll mark the holes and start that way. So I think this is going to work. So I've disassembled the cheap eBay T5 shifter, and I've taken the S10 shifter and just bolted it on there, or clamped it on there. But I wanted to make sure, see how that's straight up and down in the center, and then same thing going this way. So I've made it so everything's plumb as best I can. These are made with some extra slack in them anyway. There's looks like the holes that are diagonal from each other are usually wallowed out. You can see it on the S10 shifter here, and there they're kind of wallowed out. I think that gives you a little bit of adjustment when you go to install it for tolerances. So looks like what I'll probably have to do is I might have to grind this area here, because this hole's going to come out about here. So if I don't have quite enough room for the bolt head, I might have to take and Dremel this out or grind that out on both sides in the front. The back's fine. The shifter does have a little bit of a lip on it, but I can run that down flat and that ain't gonna hurt nothing. So I think this will work. I mean, I think that this shifter is like 30 bucks or something, 35 bucks on eBay, versus I can Hurst and somebody else makes a T5 shifter with positive stops, I think, or whatever, but they're like 200 bucks. So that's a perfectly good route to go if you don't mind spending the money, and it might be better off if this doesn't work out anyway. So, but I think it will, so I'll keep trucking along here. So I was able to drill those holes or elongate the back ones. Mostly these, you know, you can kind of see there pretty much just it needs to be elongated more than a whole new hole drilled. The fronts were all new holes, so those were pretty easy. Thankfully I had a little Dremel tool with a small carbide bit. That made wallowing out these holes a little bit easier. I tried doing it with those step bits that I have, because you can kind of mill with those going sideways, but for the fine tuning of it I needed to use a carbide bit that would fit inside these existing slots, which is like 5/16 holes, or a metric equivalent of that. So that it seems to fit on here okay. Shift's good. It's a lot stiffer than it was. I don't have the shift stops installed yet, but it's stiff. But when I put a little bit of an extension on here, it was pretty easy. And this is a short shifter as well, so I don't know. I thought that might be a good idea in the pickup, because I'm going to have a longer shift stick than a car would. So shortening up that throw will make a difference by the time you get up on top of a 28-inch shifter or whatever. I don't know what I'll end up using. Once I get it in there, I'll measure and see what's going to fit. But it feels way better than the stock shifter does, so that's good. I'm going to need to get some longer bolts. This is a lot thicker than the factory stuff, and there was already one hole that was stripped out at the top. So thankfully there's some more thread there in the bottom. I can get a longer bolt and get down into those threads without having to drill it out and go up a size or helicoil it. So, but this looks like it'll work for 30 bucks. It doesn't look pretty the way I did. If I had a milling machine or something, you could make this look real like it was made for it. But with my limited tools of drill bits, step bits, and a Dremel tool, and air grinder, whatever grinder, stuff like that. But it works, and everybody's going to see this anyway. It goes underneath the floor. But I might end up throwing a little paint on there just so it doesn't look so wacky. But no, I think this is a perfectly good solution for being cheap. If you don't mind doing a little bit of the work yourself. Yeah, I mean, it's nice and stiff. It's got springs and stuff in there. Came with some different springs, so maybe it's different tensions. I'm not familiar with these style of shifters, so I'll have to look up what that's about. But and this stuff all looks ghetto, but I'll probably order a shifter that just mounts right to this and has whatever curvature I need built into it. But these are the parts that came with the kit, so I'm just mocking it up. So yeah, I think if you want to be on the cheap and do this yourself, it seems to be totally doable. It did take me a while to get it fitted just right, wobbling out the holes and getting everything lined up just correctly, because using this as a template gets you in the ballpark, but them holes are all walled out themselves. So apparently you don't have to be exact. You can oversize everything and still be okay. Here's what I ended up with after I've removed the paper. As you can see, it's feathered into the old paint, and it just gives a smoother transition between the two. But you can see like that spot. This will all have to be redone if I ever do a really fancy job. But this way, when I put the weather stripping back on and glue it down, I don't necessarily have to take it apart to get underneath it to repaint it. I can you know, I can sand all around through here and just leave everything in here probably, unless I go for a major color change, which might happen too. But like I said, this is a ghetto way to do this. I just wanted to do it before I glue the weather stripping, put the vent back in, just save myself some hassle later on, maybe. Probably not. Engine, transmissions back in the truck. Wanted to show you how that shifted. Sorry about the banging, the wind's blowing out there and it wreaks havoc with my vent there on the wall. Anyway, engine's back in, everything's mounted up, maybe for the last time for a while now. We'll see. I still haven't finished the intake valve cover project, polishing that stuff, so I'd like to get that done and button back on there just to keep contaminants out. I cover it with rags, but it's a lot better to have it reassembled. So here's what the shifter looks like in the truck. Again, that little Z-bar thing came with the shifter, and I haven't built the shift lever for it yet. Obviously you couldn't drive around like that, I don't think. Maybe this will be an alternative to the guys that like running the really tall sticks. I'll be the alternative and run a really short stick there. No, we're not doing that, but I'm gonna have to do some measurements and build a shift lever that allows me to roll this bench seat forward, in case the kids or the wife wants to drive this once in a while. That way when I slide the bench seat forward, it doesn't make it so I can't shift gears. But I like how that come out. I'm pretty happy with it. I need to get some longer bolts because the base is thicker, and one of those holes was stripped out pretty good, but there's still some threads down there in the bottom. I need to get a shift boot for it. I assume the Mustang one will fit. I'll have to measure and check. See that little rubber boot that goes over that, and then there's another boot that goes over it when it's actually when the floor pan's in. I haven't finished the vent weather stripping thing yet. All the paint's dry. So I got to get some glue. They recommend it's like super 3M to use to attach that with. I've got it hanging here just to let it relax. And I guess the 53 to 55, this fits perfectly. The 56, I got to cut, I don't know, an inch or two out of it. So that little centerpiece there, I'll whack that out once I get it on there. But the instructions make it sound easy, but it also says it's very difficult. So I've not done that before. So I'll take my time with that. My thought was, and I might do that today, is to get the rubber on there and just clamp it down and just let it sit there for a while before I actually try to glue it. That way it starts to kind of form its shape. And that might make installing it a little bit easier. So I'll circle back to that later. I was going to do all that when the engine's out, but I got the engine transmission all done. I wanted to get it back in there, get it off the shop floor. So there's still plenty of access there to do that later. I might not circle back around to that for a while. We'll see. If I do, I'll throw it in the videos here. I don't think it'll be very exciting though, but it might be. I don't know, I heard it's hard, so I might be a good example of what not to do. That would be fun. So look forward to that. I went ahead and dry fitted the gasket on. I wasn't going to do it today, but I decided to go ahead and throw it on there. The longer it sits on there, the longer it has to form to that shape. It went on pretty easy for the most part. The corners just kind of got to work them, but this has a little bit of a groove right here, you can see, and as that goes around, it goes around the metal, you know, kind of clamps itself on there. So I can see where this is going to be tricky doing it with cement, because weather stripping cement's like contact cement. You kind of put it on there and you can't move it. So it'll be interesting to see how. I think that's the really tricky part of doing this is getting that slid on there all in one go. So I don't know how. That's how much I cut out, about 1.5 inches, which the direction said 1.5 to 2 inches for a 56. Don't have to cut it at all for a 53 to 55. Looks good. I mean, it's nice weather stripping. I got this from Mid 50. Great company. Good instructions. All that. So I definitely recommend them if you need any parts for these old trucks. So I'm gonna just leave that on there like that for who knows how long, and then eventually I'll come and take it off and put the weather stripping cement on there. But the dry fitting process goes easy, but I think I kind of expected that. It's the gluing on part that makes it tricky, but we'll see how that goes later on.